This is the Dope Black Dad podcast. Today, I am with my wonderful friends Darwood, Grace, and Leanne Levers. Sorry, Dr. Leanne Levers. Sorry, I should never. It's a lot of hours that went into getting that prefix. So I'm here with my wonderful friends, and today I really wanted to discuss are men being silenced by female empowerment. It's a provocative question. My view is yes. I don't have a voice anymore because of Leanne being empowered. Please
Clearly,
get
I
my voice
mean,
back, Leanne, please.
Oh,
But first and foremost, how are you? How are you doing, Leanne?
I'm good. I'm just kind of trying to live with the uncertainty that is COVID, and take each day as it comes. Albeit having been verbally assaulted a few times over the past few weeks. But yeah, no, I'm just trying to, as I told you earlier, build a routine and just kind of go with the flow of everything.
Yeah, that kind of makes
How are
sense.
you guys?
How are you, Darwood?
I'm good, and to be honest with you, I think my spirit started getting uplifted from when you called me the other day, Marvin, and it's just been upwards since then. And today I've just been playing bare tunes. Guys listening, check out a Nigerian British guy called Labi Safra, and
I just spell that, bro, because we can't do
LABISIFFRE.
Right, I'll have a listen. That's dope. Really appreciate that. Thank you. Sick. Yeah, I'm
what
doing,
about yourself?
I'm doing good. It's my birthday tomorrow. I'm doing good,
Is
man.
it 57?
It could be, bro. I've been around for a very long time, bro. Depending on what era you call it, feels like it's been a very long time. So I'm cool with it though. It's funny because someone asked how do you feel being 36, and it just doesn't have any meaning. It's one of those things. It's just there's nothing I connect to the number. So I'm quite enjoying where I am in this life, and I'm ready to go into my midlife crisis in style. But also trying to keep my whole family. Well, I'm going to keep my whole family together and my life together as I have my crisis. So I plan to do it powerfully. But all good. So Leanne, this is technically your topic.
Broke up there, Marv.
Can you hear me?
You broke up there, Marv.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Leanne, this is technically your topic. So do you want to tell us how it all came about, please, and give us some backstory?
Well, you called me this morning and you asked me how I was doing, and I was kind of telling you that I'm having a bit of an imposter syndrome moment most people know by now that I'm moving to Jamaica and hoping to take Dope Black Women with me. And, just in terms of letting people know that I'm moving home, there's been a lot of conversations that I've been having with men around the quote unquote gender wars that are kind of taking place in Jamaica. And a friend of mine was telling me, and I've done the research since, that there's been an increase recently in domestic violence over the past few years. And more recently this year, there's been an instance where a lot of men have been, I guess, unable to cope with kind of this advancement in women's thinking, to think that they can now go out and do some of the things that men do, like cheat or have, extramarital affairs. And so there have been instances where men have been killing their partners and then committing suicides themselves. So that was the first conversation I had, which sparked a whole lot of things that I think about all the time around gender interaction and the pressures that are on men and women to adhere to this kind of certain these expectations of how they should behave in relationships, and then, so just kind of ironically, there's been a series of instances where men have told me in no uncertain terms that my empowerment or what I define as my empowerment is making them feel silenced. More specifically, I was on Twitter. Darwood was just referencing this, and I was on Twitter, and there was a guy who didn't know him, but he had posted up a picture of a popular female dancehall artist called Aishano. I think you might know the song. She's kind of the first woman to talk, or one of the first women to talk about giving head or getting head. And kind of the whole thing around dispelling the thing about oral sex and men giving head to women.
Delicious.
Absolutely
really
delicious. And if any men out there, if you want to keep your teeth white, yam pum pum.
What?
I saw Leanne completely get what you said, and I go through a whole process of like, what? Sorry, Leanne,
God.
I'm serious.
Let's
Sorry.
just move on. I don't know the science behind it. I just know it's true.
What's
Anyway.
hilarious is both of our teeth are really white, so that's super.
There you go.
Yes.
Hey, I feel you, man.
I'm like, damn, my teeth could be a little bit whiter. Like maybe I should embrace and investigate.
I've heard
Yeah, Scissor Sisters.
Right. Okay. Let's go.
Anyway, so one of the big things around Aishana's career is that she used to go with a guy named Futa Hype, and one of the big issues around their relationship was that he beat her. He was abusive towards her,
Right.
and the guy said, Aishana put out a video basically that was, she put out a freestyle kind of framing it around COVID. And
really good freestyle as well.
Yeah, and one of the lyrics says, Minister Holness, you owe me a fuck. Basically saying, like, for all the men that you've locked away during COVID, you're depriving me of my right to sexual satisfaction.
Okay, that's mild.
As
I thought. I thought you meant him literally. Let's say, all right.
And basically the guy said something along the lines of, that's why she deserves Futa Hype, because she's always doing like dumb lyrics or something.
Wow.
So immediately, that is what I thought he meant. So I responded and I said, wow, I didn't know that controversial lyrics warranted getting to beat the shit out of you. And there are pictures of Aishana on the internet with like her face bruised and everything. So it's not a matter of whether or not he did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I guess the guy who assumingly didn't mean it in that context, but wasn't articulate enough to make that clear, took offense to the fact that I made that assumption and just went down a path of like insulting my intellect, calling me, saying that my brain cells are not working.
Are they working? Yeah.
Just like loads of other things. I think they work really well.
Okay, cool.
But,
just to double check his evidence.
I guess that's a matter of opinion, and that I was stupid and dumb to think that that's what he meant, and why would he advocate violence against women? And, it's funny because for a second I thought, am I in the wrong here? And I was just like, well, why wouldn't you think of that when you make a statement about Aishana and Futa? Like, why isn't sexual violence and the way in which she was treated at the forefront of your mind? Like, that's a big deal.
But is that his fault, or is that just a structural problem of how people perceive assault and abuse in domestic relationships?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the issue, is that, again, when it comes to Black women and sexual violence, we don't necessarily put that at the forefront of our mind, because some people either are so removed from it and it's not part of their world, or it's so normalized for them that it's just not a big deal. And then one of my girlfriends, Jeline, jumped in and said, this is really problematic, and he told her to shut the fuck up. And
I do love Jeline. You know what? Yeah, I feel like if me and you were in a relationship and we broke up, she will be the one that comes with you to get your stuff. Like that type of girl who's just on it and ready with the headband and trainers on.
But also would make sure that the reason that I'm leaving is purely valid, and then I'm not also. She's very balanced when it comes to those things, I think.
That's my sister.
Which is why she's so amazing. But yeah, so he told her to shut the fuck up. And then I was just like, oh, so you don't like physical violence, but you're okay with verbal abuse. I perfectly understand where we're going with this. And then he was just like, well, you're advocating for a suck your mother. And I was like, well, my mom's dead.
Is he from the Caribbean? Because the way he said it sounded like that's the highest form of insult possible.
Yeah, 100%. He was Jamaican. Not a guy that I know, but he's definitely Jamaican.
Yeah, that sounds like a Jamaican thing to say.
And it's interesting because, I mean, when you go down his timeline, there are other instances. So another tweet that he had posted was, what's the difference between the baby mother that kept the baby he said the tweet was like, actually, there's a difference between baby mothers that keep the baby and women who abort the baby. And what's the difference is that the one listens and the other one doesn't. And that's just the kind of like rhetoric that he was demonstrating on his timeline.
Something. How does a doctor, who I love very much, get into conversations with such low-level human beings on the internet?
You know, that one was unintentional, but you know how I am. Like, I am so, and the thing is, what really is disheartening to me is that during that conversation, there were women that came on and were like, yo, I hate feminist Twitter. I'm so tired of women making a big deal of nothing. And it's really disheartening for me because I am so passionate about like Black women and Black men. And, you know, I want to see both succeed. And I want people to both of them to succeed together. You know what I mean? I'm a huge proponent of Black love. But it brought me back to the Gayle King situation, and I'm not saying that I'm like Gayle King, but it brought me back to the situation of where most people were really concerned with whether or not I was right or wrong, rather than the fact that there's someone who's obviously just verbally and enacting like violent language against women unnecessarily. You know what I mean? And I think both conversations could be had, because he could have really just said, yo, you know, I never meant it like that. And I would have said, okay, cool, you know?
Yeah.
But instead he attempted to insult me in a myriad of ways.
From reading it, I think he did meant it and he got called out on it. And Marvyn said something yesterday to someone about taking ownership and that. But when you don't take ownership, and then I added that it's pride that doesn't let people take ownership, so they can't see that they're in the wrong out of pride. So instead of him just saying, you know what, shit, I fucked up, and that, let me pull that one back, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend anyone, he just doubled down. And then he started trying to call like your credentials and blah blah blah, and then was verbally abusive and I was like, in my head, I almost messaged you like, stop interacting with this idiot. Like, he doesn't deserve your time.
So where does the silencing come in though? Where's the silencing? How is he being silenced?
So I think following from that, I had a conversation with a friend of mine whose opinion I really do respect. A friend of mine, Dre, who lives in Jamaica and is kind of in the midst of all of this. And, you know, even within him, he challenged me on the conversation. And basically at the end, he was just like, you know what, Leanne, he really was just embarrassed that you articulated yourself a little bit better than he did. And he was like, but even for me, I feel like I have to, on some level, defend him, because we're in a space today or he feels as if he's in a space where you know, he can't say certain things that are controversial or may seem like they're anti-woman, because, you know, women are coming into a space of their own, and he doesn't feel like he can say those things without being bombarded with 20 messages or being attacked or whatever, you know, in his mind, being attacked by women. And so what's happening is that men are having those conversations amongst themselves and really just reinforcing a lot of the negative and toxic stereotypes and ideas that, you know, we have following post-colonialism around how women should behave. And so I think that's the silencing, and that is kind of sad to me, because I don't want my behavior or any woman who is trying to empower themselves to make anyone else feel silenced. And, you know, there's a narrative around how we should communicate as women in order to be heard. And there's two parts to that. I think one, women should be able to say whatever the fuck they want to say, however the fuck they want to say it, because men are allowed to
that doesn't work. Are we?
But then does it come to the
white men?
Sorry?
White men or Black men or all men?
I think both men and women, both white men and Black men have an advantage of saying certain things in a certain way, and it isn't perceived as problematic as Black women when Black women say certain things. I think there's a hierarchy. Obviously, white men can say genuinely whatever the fuck they want to say. But certainly, if I'm comparing Black men and Black women, and certainly in the context of Jamaica, I think there is a ceiling of what Black women are allowed to say and how they're allowed to say it without being labeled as aggressive or, you know, trying to, or man-hating, essentially. Because it's, you know, it's something that we're all still coming to terms with, in terms of women having positions of power and women also taking their own sexual, you know, kind of freedom into their own hands and being like, actually, if you're going to cheat on me, I'm not going to sit here and cry all day about it. I'm going to go and do whatever the fuck I want to do. And I think a lot of Jamaican men are really struggling with that ideal. I mean, certainly within my own dating experience, that has happened quite a bit. I sent Marvyn a message earlier today. I didn't say this to you at the time, but a guy messaged me and was essentially like, I've been listening to your podcasts and you and your woman movement. And he was like, the context of that conversation was that he was like, that's why you didn't want to date me. And I was like, actually, that's not true. The reason I don't want to date you is because you're seeing other women. And, you know, so I don't know if you guys listen to the Dating on Holiday episode where I go on a few dates with a guy and then he essentially, this is not the chair guy, but I go on a couple of dates with this guy. And he says to me, you know, I'm seeing other women, and I'm like, yeah, that's cool, no problem, because I don't live here, you know, so do what you got to do. But if you're trying to date me seriously, I don't expect you to continue to see other women. Anyway, that same night, we go out somewhere, and he's dropping me home, and the other girl calls, and he picks up the phone and proceeds to talk to her as if like, yeah, I'm not in the car. And then we get back to my car, and I'm getting in my car, and he just speeds out after me to go and see this girl, not even trying to pretend like, you know. And so he found this to be normal, and he doesn't see it as a reason as to why I would no longer want to date him. And he was just like, you behave as if men want to own you. And, you know, I'm going to continue to prove you wrong that men and women are different, and there's a difference between equality and equity.
Wow.
And this is someone that still would like to date me. Like, he's convinced that he's just going to find a way to control me.
He's going to fix you.
Enough so that I submit to this ideal.
Wow.
100%.
Darwood, do you feel silence?
The same narrative, you know.
No. Like, why would you feel like you've got to be super insecure to feel silent when someone else is stepping up for themselves? As long as it's not having a negative impact on you, and that, like, why wouldn't you want a strong woman around you?
Yeah, but have you ever been in a scenario where a woman has having an opinion which you strongly disagree with, but you have chosen not to share how you feel because you believe there'll be societal impact, social impact, a direct impact, or will be perceived incorrectly?
You know what? One thing I'm good at debating with women over certain things that don't impact how they feel. Like, so like we can talk about an issue and disagree. Like me and Leanne in your house, Marvyn, at your last thing, we was talking about the Michael Jackson.
Yes, I remember.
I went, like, I'm like, I don't believe it, blah, blah, blah. And I can go like that because it's got nothing to do with how Leanne feels about being a woman. And it doesn't, whatever she says or whatever I said doesn't come into the gender realm. When it starts to go into the gender realm and a woman has a strong opinion about who she is and how she's perceived, I am not a woman. So why am I adding my 2 cents to it?
All right, but then let's return to, because sometimes the perception of a woman has societal impact. So we were discussing Rihanna in last week's podcast, and Rihanna's views in terms of deciding to have 3 or 4 kids with or without men. Now, in terms of her body and choosing to have kids, that's her business. If she was a LGBT couple and decided to have kids without men, it would make sense. But why is it different for Rihanna to say that as?
Well, because she's kind of bringing she's bringing children into it, so she's having children and that, and like, if you look at the stats, 2 healthy adult parents are better than 1.
Yeah,
and that,
and does gender matter?
And it's better for the child. Say it again.
Does gender matter in that?
Say it again, Mav.
Does gender matter in that?
I don't think so, because there's many healthy children being raised by same-sex couples, and so I don't think I've got any experience to say otherwise. And with what Rihanna said, it's kind of touchy because, like, especially with the narrative that fathers have currently I think we can kind of, because she's speaking on us now, and that, and she's speaking on our role. So I think we're allowed to, but when it's got nothing to do with us and it's not having an impact on us, then you know what it is as well. And I think I've got this thing where when it comes to talking about racism, the oppressor needs to shut up and listen. And I can't have that rhetoric for one side and then not fit it to another. So when it comes to women and misogynist behavior, I think men need to shut up when it comes to that. Like, and if you feel silenced by, actually, you know what, I need to listen, and that, then you're probably an insecure person. I'll just call it out. You can come and argue with me if you want to.
What my concern is that it's been convoluted to share what we have to be silent on in terms of issues around women's rights, women's choices, and having a conversation with a woman about something. So
having a conversation is different though, because we're having a conversation now and we're talking about it. We're having a conversation. It's friendly. It's blah,
we
blah,
have
blah.
We have a wonderful specimen to the right, which really helps us have this conversation in completion. But if three men were having this conversation and then it got publicized, the framing of it being three men talking about the role of women with no women present would be seen and perceived as a mansplaining conversation about 100%. Rihanna's life and body.
So it should be. And so it should
be. But what I'm saying is, as you said earlier, it involves men and it involves a wider society, i.e. children. So it's not as straightforward as women are talking about women's rights, how they choose to go about their lives, and we're just jumping in and being like, hey, hold on a minute, you shouldn't wear bras or you should wear bras. This is about children.
But do you see what you're saying? Like you shouldn't, and like, hold on a minute, you shouldn't, and that's different. Like, that's not a conversation. That's you telling someone what they can and cannot do.
No, but it's a view.
That's not really a conversation, though.
No, but it's not really about the conversation. All of this is about, can I have a view? And yes, I shouldn't have a view on. Let me quickly finish. I shouldn't have a view on whether women should or shouldn't wear bras and underwear or not, and what they should do with their persons. But when we're talking about what we do as humanity, i.e. we're starting to design families in different ways, and we accept two-parent families from the same sex as a part of the extension of the acceptance and understanding and endorsement of LGBT. But then if a woman then individually just chooses to have children with no attempt to have a long-term partner involved, then do we have space to have a view, or are we still saying no, this is Rihanna, this is her body, this is her life, and she could do what she wants? And I feel like not everyone's clear on the difference.
But because and I don't think we'll ever get into a clear space where men feel like it's right to jump in or not. But I do think that the only reason why I commented on the Rihanna one was literally because it does involve sperm, which is something that men donate. She can't have a child with a woman. She can't. It's impossible.
Yeah. So, Leanne, where are you with it?
I mean, I think there is a gender element to it. And I think, there's two things. I think one, the gender element is that she's a woman and she does have a biological clock, right? So there is some...
Which is what I did say.
She's 32, just as an FYI to the people listening.
Yeah, I mean, and doctors will tell you that at the age of 35 is when you really need to start being worried. So if or you need to start making considerations for...
Because the older you get, the more chance of risking having a child with Down syndrome and stuff like that. And
just like the number of eggs that you have and that kind of thing, just generally, I think there are real considerations. And just from a life plan perspective, you want to have kids at a certain age. And so even though I don't take the same view as her personally, I also think that it's not whether or not you have an opinion on what she says, it's the fact that you can respect that she has that opinion and she has the right to it. right? And I think that's the distinction between having a conversation and telling somebody what to do.
Yeah.
Is that I think these conversations are important for the oppressor and the oppressed. You know, I want to engage in these kind of conversations with men, because then we'll both grow. There's no point in me embracing this empowerment and growing and becoming more woke or aware, and men are stuck in the same position. Like, we need to grow together. And I think if we don't have these conversations with men, then we'll never get to even a middle ground. But I think it has to start from the foundation of both people being able to say, we respect the right to the difference of opinion, but we both have the right to one.
No,
See, this is why you got a doctorate, because that's what I wanted to articulate.
I think you did in your way. I think what's really interesting is that the confidence or the fear of like, nobody really understands the formula. I'm comfortable having conversations because I know where there's a space for me, and when there's not, I'm happy to bow out, and I don't feel like my voice needs to be heard in every conversation. So it's not an egotistical thing for me. But at the same time, if you speak to men in real terms, they don't really understand where they do have a space and where they don't, and sometimes they want to contribute. So it's almost like we went through hundreds and hundreds of years where, let's say, for example, black men didn't protect black women. They didn't do a great job. Tons of things happened to both of them, but also probably did impact black women significantly more. And so we've moved from this warfare of physicality, where people are beaten up, whipped, raped, into a more evolved warfare, which is more digital, which is more intellectual in this era than ever. And so women at this point are in a fantastic position to be on the forefront and lead that warfare from an academic, intellectual point of view, an emotional point of view as well, more so than men. And so is there a call for them women now to fully take the baton and lead us, or lead humanity into the next phase of things? And is it us just to get out of the way, or do we contribute in terms of giving back and understanding some of the things that we did wrong from before? How does that dynamic and role play going forward?
I mean, I think there's a number of factors to be considered, and I think one of the things for me specifically about I think there is a cultural difference as well. So when you talk about Jamaica, you do see that women are taking up more middle senior positions of management positions. You do see that they're overwhelmingly represented in comparison to men in terms of access to like tertiary education and that kind of thing. And that creates certain pressures. And I do think that, yes, we should definitely be making room for women to kind of take a greater sense of ownership in moving us forward. But I think there's also this kind of the approach that some women take in this whole like men are trash narrative really oversimplifies and doesn't give credence to the long-standing oppression of black men. And it's like we're almost doing away with it. It's the same thing when white people say, oh, but slavery is done, like let's get over it. Like, no, there are real things that black men refuse to face, and there are real things that black women are ignoring around, like you said, rape and the separation of families during colonialism and slavery, and the impact that has on the black male situation, and even in terms of things of how men process not relationships, but emotions. And I think that has an impact, and that's something that we don't discuss that often because we're very much focused on women's roles. And I think there needs to be a synthesis of those conversations.
And I agree with you. What my concern is so, and obviously we're taking anecdotal evidence from how conversations take place on social media, so for Twitter, for example. And quite often what we're seeing is this collectivizing of men and collectivizing rubbishing of men as a homogenous group of people who have done all things wrong. It removes all the nuance between racial differences, sexual differences, and socioeconomic differences as well. So, but what my concern is the statement of like, listen to women and believe women collectively. It ignores the idea that there are toxic women, and it ignores the idea that there are healthy men. And so, yes, you're right about the synthesis, but we're also then just believing every woman, regardless of her life, background, history. So we got to believe Katie Hopkins the same way we got to believe Afua Hirsch because it's women. that there is a flaw in that understanding, because they both have a history that you could review and make a call as to, on a human level, I choose to believe you, follow you, accept you, regardless of the fact that you're women.
Is that specific to sexual violence, or are you just saying generally?
Well, no, I'm talking generally, because
Okay.
I think for sexual violence, it's a slightly different behavior. And I think the history of denying sexual violence acts against women has been hugely problematic, to steal your word.
Okay, I was going to say, I don't know if you saw my eye twitch when you said that. So I thought you were talking about sexual violence.
But at the same time, like there is an element of, in a human level, there are trash people. Where does that go into place when we're starting to take on this idea that we just must believe, understand, agree, accept that women have their own voice? It's like, it should come in a form or structure, the same way men's voice is in a structure. You don't believe me because I'm a man. You believe me because the position that I play within my job or within my community, or I'm a trusted voice in my community. So you take my voice as something completely different. You don't just apply masculinity to my voice on all subjects. That would be bizarre.
Well, I mean, some people do. Some people, I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were like, oh, sometimes I forget that you're a human being or that you're a woman because you're also a doctor. And I was like, if I was a man, you would never say that to me. But particularly in the world of academia, I can say that just because someone else is a man, their opinion is taken as gospel. And even within the context of me, because I choose to talk about certain things on Dope Black Women regarding sexuality and my own fuck-ups and my own toxic behaviors, somehow my capacity for intellect is lessened. So I do think we are still in that phase where men are listened to more just because they're men.
I agree with you, and I think in that context, you're 100% right. So in professional side by side, a male doctor's voice is different to a female doctor's voice, and they might need a second opinion or undermine in some condescending way, which is why the importance of microaggressions has been used as a measurement for the difference in views, because it's no longer blatant, as in, you're a woman, you can't be my doctor. It's now just like, oh, you're my doctor, and you're like, okay, cool, this is what we're measuring. I suppose is like, if you said to look forward into the future, what does the actual utopia look like? What does equality actually look like? Because to get to equality, there needs to be justice, and in that process of justice, it will feel like oppression to some men. But how do we get through that? What's the approach that minimizes that feeling? Because that feeling is just going to be resistance. It's going to be like, you're taking away, it's a bit like Americans, you're taking away our guns, and how they turn into completely different people. You're like, you're taking away our guns and it's our Second Amendment. It's like, whoa, just wait a second. We're just saying maybe we should check the person's mental health. Like, how do we get into a point where we transition from where we are to where we want to be with potentially the least amount of damage and resistance possible?
It's a tricky one. I think, and I'm going to speak specifically around Black men and Black women, as opposed to the wider, our other counterparts. But I think, I think between Black men and Black women, it's just, as I said, those conversations just need to start from the basis of everybody's entitled to their own opinion, and understanding that throughout those conversations, people are going to say some really toxic things. I mean, even my friend Dre and I constantly go back and forth, but because we are open to the idea of listening to each other's conversations, I've learned more about how men feel, even if I don't agree with it, but understanding how they feel is a stepping stone for me to reconcile the issue, and so I think if we can just start from that basis, there are going to be casualties, and there are going to be toxic women, as you say, who will stick to this men are trash narrative. I mean, I have a girlfriend who messages me every single day and says men are shit every single day. And that's because that's how she feels,
Or the men she chooses. Maybe she should.
Or the, men she chooses.
Hey, walk away right now. There's nothing to see here. Move on,
Let's be
people.
clear. Let's be
Social
clear.
distancing.
Let's be clear. There are limitations and parameters around the men that we are available, that the men that are available to be chosen, because not every man who is quote unquote eligible or has certain values wants to date a dark-skinned black woman, and that's an issue.
It's another kind of worms.
There are a lot of the professional men that are in Jamaica, just as an example, since that's kind of where this started. But even here, they say they like a strong woman and they want an independent one. But if she's too independent, if she makes a little bit more money, if she doesn't look a certain way aesthetically, and she doesn't maintain to a certain standard, in terms of what she chooses to put on, whether she wears makeup every day, those things.
Yeah, men don't like being emasculated.
Yeah,
that's all that boils down to. Every time I hear that narrative playing out, I'm like, oh, you just didn't want to be emasculated, and because you're not sure of your own manhood. Your manhood is so fragile.
I think most women aren't out to emasculate men, and it's a little bit just like, well, we have to take what's left, and some of those men ain't shit,
But do you know what it is? And I'll speak completely personally at this point. Is that I was raised by a first generation Jamaican grandmother. My mum was raised under that also. She's born here, but by a strong Jamaican woman led, strong characters, aunts, my older sister. I only know strong black women. Mm-hmm. This utopia of men having all the power, all the say. I'm not saying I didn't have privilege. I definitely did in my rising, but I never got this Mad Men scenario of like it all works for me. I don't know it. I don't understand it, and so it does feel a little bit like oppression at times for me when you're in your office and you just see like all the women get up and go for a walk because they've got a special lunch that they've got to show them how to be leaders. And I'm like, no one showed me how to be a leader. Hold on a minute. Like, so at times it can feel a little bit like, and actually sometimes, especially women in the office, sometimes I've spoken to them and they've said, actually, sometimes this stuff is a little bit too much and I just want to get on with it. Like it's great that women are being considered for promotion and are considered for CEO, and there's more CEOs than ever. And that's that conscious implementation of women in the right places fundamentally is important. But when it becomes this kind of like consistent underbelly of activity of like women must, then it just feels strange because we're also in a generation of men. Yes, there are tons of toxic men, but there are more good men than ever. And so what happens to those good men who don't take advantage of women?
Oh, I 100% agree that women are, but I 100% agree that women are complicit in some of those toxic behaviors and forcing men into fulfilling certain preconceived notions. Some women refuse to date or refuse to interact with men that don't look a certain way or don't make a certain amount of money, even though they're wholesome, really good guys. And so I completely agree with you that it probably does feel like oppression sometimes.
The one thing, if we are discussing this about what women want, I always find that women always want a man to be a man though. Like I've never spoke to a woman and give an example, like if a man doesn't act like a man, they find it unattractive. And I think it's kind of hardwired into us from like the caveman days and whatnot, like the alpha male. Women are attracted to alpha males. And that, so as empowering as women are becoming, every time I speak to an empowered woman about what sort of guy she's looking for, she wants an alpha male type. And I'm just like, but the beta males are really good guys and the alpha males are probably arseholes.
But what I will say though is that I think there's an age divide in that, because I would say the women in their 20s, they just want, there's a almost like a interchanging or fluidity between even the genders that they would consider dating, what they would consider a partner to be. And so it isn't as simple as I want my man to be a man. It's like, I want to be loved and I want to be of a good person. And preferably it would be a man. But if it's not, I will more than ever environmentally consider love openly rather than this idea that what I must do, I must date a man and be with him and have a child. It's like, I just want to be loved and looked after, respected, and treated right. So, and actually some of the men, especially the men in Dope Black Men, it's really interesting because they are a product of that. And they're such feminists to the point that they probably devalue or minimize who they are in making sure that women have the space, time, and are respected in the right way, which is amazing in one sense, but also a challenge in another, because as I said before, there is a generation of men who were incorrectly raised but have found their own North Star, and they need to create space for themselves. They need support also. They need their own space where they can have their special meeting about how do you go on and become a leader, because you haven't grown up in an orthodox
And I think Black women often forget that, like, Black male patriarchy is different from patriarchy, you know, and there is a difference between the two, and it doesn't function in the same way. And I think sometimes women often treat men as if they have access to the same you know, entitlement that, or are entitled to the same things that white men are, and they're not. And I 100% agree with you that nobody should put female empowerment to the detriment of silencing themselves, regardless of what your opinion is, as long as you're able to, you know, discuss the matter in a way that's respectful and demonstrates that you are listening to me and that you want to be heard. But I don't subscribe to the whole men are trash and men should not talk when women are speaking and about certain issues. I don't agree with that.
Absolutely. Darwood, do you want to have a final word, because we're about to wrap up?
Yeah, guys, don't be silenced by women's empowerment.
Yeah.
You look stupid, but yeah.
Cool. Well, look, I think you're right. I think the key thing is that it's never about when you come from a place and environment where you're already championing women and you're already doing the work and trying to create space and open to being challenged about even the things that I do or the things that we do and norms that we create. It's harder to watch the show go on and how it becomes performative. I actually remember I was in a meeting and we had just done something with Dope Black Mums or Women, and they were and actually I'd done something the following day with the BAME business leaders for Labour, and a large group of women were somehow together, but they were talking about the idea of BAME and not being connected to it, and saying it doesn't represent us. We're Black women, and Black women, in my view, are leading this challenge and charge for equality in a much more proactive way than anybody else is. So I listened to that in a really real way and didn't want to use BAME around us, because I didn't think it was indicative of who we were, what we're trying to do. So I said this to a Black woman, and then she just said, well, I'm a Black woman and I think BAME is fine. And that was her version of end of conversation. And I was like, yeah, but I've just literally sat in 2 focus groups and they've been telling me that they don't like the word BAME. And you, because you're a Black woman, won't allow me to bring that into the discussion because you're a Black woman and you don't agree with it. And I was just like, this is a ridiculous environment. It left me quite spiky because it made me just not want to bother. And I actually haven't bothered to interact with them since, because it's like, if that's your way of approaching it, then I don't need to be in this space. You don't need my help on anything if you've got all the answers by yourself, and even things that have nothing to do with you, just in generally how we collectively approach our own experiences. So yeah, I don't have an answer. My goal is to always create space for women and make sure that I'm not doing things that impact them in a negative way. But at the same time, I want to ensure that the transition from where we were to where we are is done collaboratively and not done how it was before, where it was men trying to do it on their own, do it really badly, and destroy Black women and themselves in the process, and set us all back probably a couple of 100 years. So let's do it together, and we will go faster and further. So that's my view.
Cool. Just had a really tiny thought, and that could female empowerment scare men because of the sexuality or the sexual freedom that women are now able to enjoy or are expressing themselves more with? Because you got to remember, like, unless a woman says yes to a guy, it's rape. So therefore, they kind of have the sexual power. They hold sexual power.
I'm happy for women to have sexual power, just from my point of view.
100%.
Please have all the sexual power you need.
No, but 100%. I completely agree with you. I think, and it speaks to the kind of ownership that men have over women's bodies or feel entitled to over women's bodies generally. I mean, the idea that when you, as you said, that women are now in a position where they're able to be okay with the idea of cheating, or the idea that they might have more than one person that they're sleeping with, is a real effrontery to men for some reason. And I do think it's the idea that once you've slept with a woman, there is this idea that somehow have ownership over a body,
and I think that comes back down to like years and years and years ago, because obviously if a woman has a child, she could say it's anybody's, it's yours, and a man will never know. And I think maybe in order to control that narrative, that's where men started developing this sort of behavior, because there was no other way to establish that a child was yours. And maybe that fear is being unraveled, that, society's changing, that might change with it.
Do you know what I just became aware too, is that when I'm speaking about the problematic elements of women speaking, I'm thinking of the worst version of a woman at that time. Someone online who's not particularly well referenced, well read, just yelling. Yeah, just I'm not going to say any names because I don't want to get told. But like,
Marvyn, why did you say slumflower?
Oh yeah, clever. And so I'm thinking of the like individual idiot, and I assume when women are saying men are trash, they're thinking of that one trash guy and then collectivizing it. And I'm doing it too. Even in this conversation, I'm doing it. I'm thinking of somebody who has communicated online really badly, and I'm just like, why do you represent us in the middle who are trying, at least open to the gospel? We're not involved in that. We're already harmoniously having these conversations. We obviously have the dope black spaces. We're already doing the work. So in reality, we're talking about the top and bottom 5% when we speak about the best and worst of us. And we should probably speak about the middle, because the middle has the volume. And we're trying to find a better solution. And I'm open for the sexual liberation of black women. Please feel free.
Yeah, please. It'd be nice to not, to be. I was just about to say it'd be nice not to chase, but I haven't chased a woman for decades.
It's interesting. Somebody else said that to me. They were like, I'm really excited about this female empowerment thing, because it means that men will have to deal with the rejection of pursuing women less, and that women finally have a chance to see how it feels to be rejected by a man.
I've rejected women before, though. It's fun. Like literally,
you're like,
quite
proudly.
This is how women feel all the time.
That was quite jokerish.
That was the first one. Huh?
That was quite jokerish. That was quite jokerish. Like, it's quite fun.
You took glee.
It was fun. It was fun. Every time I said no to a woman, I felt like I'm like, wow, this is no wonder.
But I think I am really conflicted when I have to reject a man. It's not fun for women to do it. Like, maybe some women, I don't know, but it's not fun for women to do it. And I think there is this kind of tit for tat attitude that we have, whereas even in the context of men explaining themselves or having a voice in women's conversations, it's like, well, we've had to shut the fuck up for so long. No, maybe it's your turn. And I think that prevents the conversation amongst the middle ground, is that some women just want to be heard, and they feel like they've been silenced for so long that they're like, actually, you stop talking now. But that defeats, it's kind of self-defeating, and so I'm quite happy to be rejected. Like, it's not an issue for me. But I don't do it because, but in the same vein, I'm not going to do it because like, it's my turn, or like that kind of tit for tat attitude doesn't work for me.
I've heard other things. Anyway, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate you coming through. Really, I love you, Darwood. Love you, Leanne. Thank you so much for joining me. Let's definitely do this again soon.
Yes,
preferably on a topic which doesn't make me sweat so much, but I appreciate it.
Bye, guys. Love you guys.
Take care.
Bye.